Welcome to Autism ADHD TV. It is the place to be for parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc Moses, the mom psychologist who gets it. We dive into all kinds of important information like behavior, social skills, and learning. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Nicole. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you and excited to be here.
Well, I'm going to introduce you real quick. Nicole Holcomb has over 25 years of experience as an attorney, educator, school counselor, and administrator, and has, I'm convinced, done everything. She's a proud mom to an amazing daughter thriving with dyslexia and dysgraphia. Nicole's the host of Dyslexia Mom Life podcast and founder of the Dyslexia Parenting Academy. Nicole coaches moms who raise children with dyslexia, find clarity, and to create a plan for their journey. So again, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, we know that so many children with autism and or ADHD are more likely to have learning differences. And those learning differences can make a big impact on their life. So tell me, when did you start noticing those differences in your daughter?
So yeah, it was really early on. I would say probably even during like preschool age, she started having some difficulty with speech and articulation. There were just words that she would say that we couldn't quite understand. And she was struggling a lot really early on. So I would say probably 2.5 or so, we had her in speech therapy, which she's still in today. But it wasn't until kindergarten that we realized that this was something that was more than just speech. Something else was at play. Yeah.
And did the teachers bring up their concerns with you too?
Yeah, so we had struggled for a while with the speech, with being able to understand her, the articulation pieces, some of her sounds, it was hard to understand. And, there were just many times that the articulation pieces were really difficult. But as far as, getting into the dyslexia piece, it was more of let's wait and see still early on, because some of the things that she was experiencing could be considered by educators to be more developmental in pieces. And so the letters being backwards or the numbers being written backwards, early on in kindergarten, that could be pretty typical for a child that age. And so it was more focused at the beginning on the speech therapy and the speech articulation concerns.
Got it. Okay. So then we have our next step, right?
Right.
So they already took some steps for speech therapy. And then, their requirements when they're in school and they get farther along, they're going to be that there's more expectation of reading, more expectation of writing. So tell me about her experience with those things.
Sure, absolutely. So I think when it really started hitting home, more academic pieces was during kindergarten. And so I can remember vividly, there were times when pretty much the whole time really that she really struggled to learn sight words. So in kindergarten, she did recognize the letters, or it appeared that she recognized the letters of the alphabet and some of the sounds, right? And so I'm very creative, had pretty decent, vocabulary and things of that nature. But when it came to learning the sight words that were then the next step of reading, we would work all week on the sight words, right? We had the little flashcards and we'd be working, and, she would know them on Tuesday, and then Thursday night would come and she would just say a random word that didn't even start with the same letter that the word started with. It would just be a random word. And I can remember she would either be silly acting or she would be kind of, I don't know. I just don't know. It was just kind of different how she would react on different days. And, at the beginning it was frustrating because I was like, why isn't she, I know she knew earlier in the week. And so, but she was already really struggling with just those early pieces. And I remember reaching out early on to our school had a reading specialist. And she said, well, really, first semester of kindergarten, we just throw the sight words out there and we see some kids, it clicks really quickly. And for other kids, it may be November, December, and then the light goes on and they kind of start, learning those pieces. So let's just hold on a bit and see how she does. And so we did. And it didn't get any better, unfortunately.
Okay, got it. So really trying to figure out where there is that, their children kind of develop at their own pace, but we also don't want to wait too long, right, before we start services. So when you notice it really didn't seem to be getting better for her, then what was your next step after that?
Sure. So luckily, our teachers were actually incredible. They were very supportive, and we actually had our reading specialist in our school was Orton Gillingham trained. And so she was very familiar with dyslexia. I didn't know any of that at the time. I didn't find all that out till way later, but she worked with her a lot, and she kept saying, I just can't put my finger on it. And when it finally, I guess what that last aha moment for me was, August of first grade. And I can remember Hattie brought home her math. She had a math sheet every week, and it was like a Monday column, a Tuesday column. And so they did their addition and subtraction, and then they would turn it in at the end of the week. She loves math. She's a math whiz. She does really good in math. And I remember looking at that page and thinking, this just doesn't make sense. So for example, I'll give you an example, Holly. It would be like 5 + 0 equals. And she'd write the 5 backwards. And she'd write the 7 backwards, and she'd write the 6 backwards. And there were several numbers that she would write backwards. And I looked at it and I thought, not knowing at that point a lot about dyslexia, I looked at it and I said, this is strange to me. I'm thinking to myself, because, if she's got to recall it from memory, I thought that's one thing, but it's on the paper. There's an example there. So she sees how to correctly write the 5, but she's still flipping it. I don't understand. So at that point, I reached back out to our reading specialist, and I told her, this is what's going on at home. And I never will forget, she texted back, yes, we are starting to see a concern. So that's when I decided, okay, we're not going to wait to see if this is developmental. We're going to take some additional action. And so at the time, I actually worked for a large school district in Atlanta. And I actually I worked at the district office. So I walked down to the head of special ed and I said, I'm going to need to test my daughter. I think she's dyslexic. And so that started that very long process. Took several months, which was shorter than some people. But it took several months till we found out. And then we weren't told she was dyslexic. We were told she had a specific learning disability, as many people do in public school. And so it wasn't at that point that our tutor, our reading specialist, like, yeah, she's classic dyslexic. But at the point that we were at in Georgia, that wasn't a conversation we were having at that meeting. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you went forward with testing in the school.
Yes. So so she was evaluated that fall semester of first grade. And so I think it was in December that we got the results. And so going into Christmas, second semester, then we were able to have a meeting to get more information. Yeah.
So there's so many parts of what you're saying, right? So we could go in lots of directions, but the first direction I would go into is try to get that evaluation early like you did.
Yes, absolutely. It's the key to everything.
It really is the key to everything.
Mm-hmm.
What we find is many kids are not identified until later, and that can have a big negative impact in their lives. And we'll get into that a little bit. But how did you feel as a mom?
Yeah.
What was it like for you?
Yeah. It was, it was a little bit, at that point, I felt relieved. I know kind of what's going on now, but then on the other hand, I felt very overwhelmed there. It seemed like, and put this in context, I have an undergrad in elementary ed. I have 2 graduate degrees in school counseling. I had been a school counselor. My husband teaches high school and film production. He has a master's in special ed. I've got family members that have degrees in education. And we know it's hereditary, but we didn't know at the time either one of us were dyslexic. So we completely didn't have it on our radar. But I think the benefit we had was that because of the speech, we had her in a small private school with probably only 10 kids in the class. And so at the time, as a mom, I thought I was doing the right thing. And then later I felt guilty because I was like, I thought that this would be a benefit to her, but now she sticks out because she's the one kid that can't read in her class, right? So it's just a lot of mixed emotions, but I know in my heart that, we were there for a reason. She probably would not have been identified this early had we not been in a setting where it was a small setting and we were very close to the teachers, and she'd been there since pre-K. So the faculty really knew her and knew of her struggles. But, as a mom, you go through all those. I can remember stuff that happened in pre-K, like she was really slow to complete assignments sometimes and things like that. And I think, well, that was probably a clue. You start second guessing yourself of the things that you did miss, because you're going to miss things because you don't know that you're looking for it. And you just feel a little overwhelmed and alone at the beginning. You just don't really know where to turn. And even though I was educated, I still didn't know, like, where is the go-to place? Where can I go to get information that is valid and reliable? And that's one of the reasons I also branched out and started my own thing, because I wanted other moms not to have to go through that, to be able to go to one place and get what she needed at the beginning of her journey.
That makes so much sense, because you said it's almost all the feelings, right?
Yeah, all the feelings,
all the feelings, the relief and the kind of sadness, because that means that things are going to be harder.
Right. And you don't know what those really look like at the beginning. Like you're like, what is it going to look like? How is she going to, worried about all the academic, the social, the emotional, all the pieces of just her being a well-rounded adult and being able to function. Right. And you just worry, is she ever going to learn to read? Is she going to be able to, her education now was going to be on a different track than everybody else that I knew or felt like I knew, or even people in our family. We've got nieces and nephews that are close in age. And I was like, her educational experience is going to be completely different. And it is completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea in your head of kind of what that journey would typically look like is not going to be the same for her, because that's not going to serve her.
Right. Right.
So I think that brings up some feelings in itself. So you also brought up a little bit of guilt. And I think that that's also a common thing. Why didn't I do something earlier? Or did I miss something? Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so hard. Because we always want to do, and I think that just speaks to our values, as parents, we want to do the best that we can. And really identifying, again, those learning differences early can make a massive impact. Absolutely. Sometimes what happens is a patient will come to see me for behavior problems. Their parents are concerned, their teachers are concerned, and also, anxiety in the classroom, or symptoms of depression, even at a young age. And something that I'm always asking is, have they been evaluated for any learning differences? Have we had an IQ test? Have we had an achievement test? We need to look at all of those things, because those are giant pieces of all of this that we can't forget. So even when they're young, it's still important to have those tests done, because what happens if some behavior challenges really are coming out of a place where I'm always behind? I can never catch up. Everybody seems to understand and I don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, the teacher's going too fast, and then they feel as though they can't ask the teacher to slow down, and then the teacher doesn't know.
Yeah.
Because
and we didn't know. Yeah. And we didn't know early on either, because of the type of testing that we had. It wasn't until we actually had her in a different school. She went to a private school, an immersion school for dyslexics. So every child is dyslexic in the building, and they're all taught, a certain way to remediate them. And we were still hitting a wall with the speech, and they thought the speech therapist we had at the time, we had moved across Atlanta. She said we had a different speech person, and she said a speech language pathologist. And she said, I think she may have apraxia. And I looked that up and I was like, that's kind of a big diagnosis. So we ended up going to the Atlanta Speech School and having at that point a private evaluation done. And that's when we started learning about the dysgraphia, learning about handwriting, learning about some of the executive functioning pieces, and just the way her brain thinks differently. And so that was very enlightening. And it was a huge opportunity to really have some conversations without worrying. When you do the public school evaluation, everybody's worried about being sued. And I can say that because that's the office I used to work in at that point. And so, you worry about saying this or not saying that. But when you're with a private person, they're just going to tell you like it is. And they're going to look at the whole child and give you all those pieces that you might not be aware of. And I didn't know it was going to be like peeling an onion back. And this dyslexic mind was going to then have other things that happen, because almost every child does. Almost every child with dyslexia or a learning difference has more than one thing, right? It just seems like it goes together. And so then you start learning all those other pieces that may be hindering your progress along the way, because it wasn't until, in first grade, the school we were in, we really enjoyed. She was really doing well. We had the services we thought we needed. It wasn't until she would get stomach aches. And she loved school. She loved her teacher, but her stomach would hurt. And then she would go to school and her teacher would call me and say, she's complaining that her stomach hurts. And I reached out to a specialist in Atlanta who looked at our test results from the public school. And she's like, well, tell me about the remediation. And I said, well, we've got the reading specialist in the building in small group. And then we do 1 day a week speech, 1 day a week private tutoring. She's like, that's not enough. You're seeing those signs because now that this is spring semester at this point, first grade, we had some things in motion. We didn't have enough stuff in motion, and she was exhausted. And that's when we decided to pivot and go to a private school where she could get her remediation built into her day, because it was really important to our family that she had time outside of the school to pursue her strengths and her passions, so that we could have a better balance for her, so she didn't continue to have to go 2 days or 4 days or 5 days a week to additional academics. We wanted that to be able to be built in, and we, was fortunate enough that we were able to do that as a family. And I know that it completely changed the path that she's on. Like I said earlier, she's on a different path than everybody else in our family, but it's an amazing path. And I think it's going to take her a different direction than it would have taken her had she stayed on the path she was on.
So you really, again, had to think of not only were the services put in place, but was it enough?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is, when you talk about that journey, that's a lot of obstacles to sort of get around and
Yeah.
and figure out. And I really think of that, kind of this idea in my head of, have you ever seen one of those? Have you ever seen or heard of one of those Tough Mudder contests where they're like going through the mud and they're having to do all these physical, throw themselves over these different obstacles and what? That's how I think parenting.
Right.
Sometimes. So sometimes you don't know what's coming up. But
right. What's going to be over that wall? Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get over that wall. Exactly. Or maybe it's around it or something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really,
you got to get really creative. Yeah.
Really getting creative for sure. Because again, I think all parents and educators and we all have this idea of the journey and what it may look like. And then we have to really peel apart, like you said, the onion and figure out what is underneath this. What does this child really need? And when you brought up stomach aches, that's definitely something I see in my practice as well, where, children may have these physical complaints, headaches,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
belly aches, and a lot of that has to do with anxiety.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you're getting information, and it's a lot of information again during the school day, and the expectation is that you're supposed to get it and keep up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then there might be these feelings of something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough. And we definitely don't want these to be the foundational thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. And, it wasn't until a couple of years later that she shared that last year at the school that she said, she's had a best friend there. And she's like, she was reading chapter books, and it wasn't until later that she shared some of that, that I realized that, there's a lot more to unpack there probably even. And I can remember that year we knew by the end of the school year that we were moving to a different school. But I can remember going to a Mother's Day like event at the school, and I can remember vividly sitting there and looking around. And of course, everybody's got their nice little things they've written about their mom, and then you got your little handmade whatever they made you. And I remember she had written out some sentences, my mom is, or whatever it was. And oh, look how sweet. And I couldn't read them. Like I didn't know what she had written. And so I asked her, I said, "Hey, can you read this to mom and tell me what you've written?" And it'd probably been a week or so, I guess, that she'd written it. And she couldn't, she didn't know. And I just remember saying something to the teacher. I said, and she was so very supportive. And she said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm just looking around." And she said, "Yeah, you can see, can't you?" I said, "Yeah, I can see." And I just remember that I just had to hold the tears back, because that's when I went to that moment of, I thought I was doing her a benefit by putting her in a private school with small student to teacher ratio. But really what I've done is made her stick out in a room of kids that were doing, great. Kind of find out later, there's one or two other kids in there that are dyslexic. We don't know at the time, but from your lens of what you're looking through, right, you immediately see the kid to the left to the right, and you're like, "Oh wow, yeah, I can see that." And at that moment I had this flood of emotions, because I thought, she sits in this all day long, 5 days a week, knowing she can't read her own writing, she's not spelling words correctly, she can't read. I mean, I can't imagine going to work and not being able to check my email, or to do, a project I do every day, having to relearn that every morning, or being told you're not doing that right. Luckily, her teachers were all very supportive and loves her to this day. So that was helpful. But I can't imagine, she doesn't talk about it, but I can imagine how that must have made her feel. And so at that point, it was kind of that reassurance. It was kind of an aha moment of, you are doing the right thing. I'm selling a house. I'm moving my job. I commuted 3 hours a day the first year back and forth to my old job. She left a school she'd been at ever since pre-K 2 or 3. And we went and put her in a brand new school, moved to a brand new community. We did a lot of they say those transition things are difficult for anxiety. If you have a death in your family, if you move, you get a job. Well, we just tried to do them all at one time. Right. Because at that time too, my mother-in-law had just passed away. And so we just had a lot of life stuff going on all at one time. But the thing that kept me focused was, I wanted to do everything I could for her so that I could give her a shot to be successful in life. I didn't want to leave. I mean, you try not to leave anything to chance, although that's how life is. But I knew I had to do everything I could do to put her in a position where she would have the tools that she needed. She would know how to decode, and she would have the benefit of morphology to learn what does this prefix actually mean, and the definition, and just opportunities that she wouldn't have where she currently was. They had done everything they could do for her, they said. And her teacher she's almost in tears. She's like, "I'm so glad that you're taking her to this school. It's going to make a difference. We've done all we can do here for her." And we just stood there and cried together. It was just, yeah, it was just a lot. Yeah.
That is a lot. And you went through so much at one time.
Yes. She was
So
such a trooper too, our daughter. I mean, she was just amazing through it all. She said she's in first grade at this point, and she's like, "I just am really struggling." When we talked about it, and she had to go shadow at the school, she's like, "I'm really struggling. I do think this would be a good opportunity for me." And I was like,
wow.
how old are you?"
Yeah, first grade, what?
I'm like, "Okay, well, yeah, it's an opportunity for us all. So let's go." So yeah.
Right.
So she's got
Wow.
an amazing spirit about her. So
She does. And again, I think the parent gut, right? Like, we know,
yeah.
plus of course we want to surround ourselves with great information. I remember when we went to an open house at he was at the time, he was in second grade. And it was a small school, and it was definitely evident who did what on the wall, right?
Yeah.
So they were expected to write just a one sentence story and have it posted up. And his looked so much different than everyone else's, and he knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really difficult. So, again, thank you so much for sharing. And those of you who, when Nicole said cute earlier, it was Sammy. Those who are listening on the podcast.
I forgot they can't see us. That's right.
Right. If you're watching, Autism ADHD PTV, you're looking at Sammy right now. But that was him kind of ringing the bell and barking. And so I thought I better just pick him up. But as you've been on this journey and you continue to be on this journey, it sounds like you've noticed that it's hard to get great information in one place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me about Dyslexia Parenting Academy.
Sure. So, yeah, so I created a course that's really just like a beginning of your journey type course. So it's for moms who have either just found out their child's dyslexic, or they started their journey, but they're kind of stuck, kind of like they've gone down one path and they're not making any progress. And so really it's the Dyslexia Battle Blueprint course. And it's really a lot of it at the beginning is clarity. And so the first module is all about mindset. It's about, shame and grief and the stages of grief. And we talk about all of those things. And I talk about, we talk about the strengths that their children have. And really the course is all centered around how to goal set and how to set up a goal, a master plan for your child. Where do you see your child, after school? As far as when they're done with 12th grade, where does your child want to go, or where do you see your child going? And then you're kind of walking backwards and setting what I call roadmaps. So they're setting some short-term goals. What should we do this year in 4th grade to prepare for middle school? What should we do? And, what should I expect for my child to do as far as skills? And, I like to talk a lot about, probably because of my background in school counseling, but I like to talk about all avenues. So I talk about academics, obviously, but also the social and emotional pieces that absolutely have to go together. And then I also, we spent a good bit of time in the course and in my podcast and my blogs, and all these go hand in hand, talking about how to identify the strengths and the passions, and really getting in tune with that with your child and exploring that. And because that's such a positive way for them to have self-confidence, and for them to really, have teammates and really feel good about themselves, when all day long, if they're in the middle of their remediation or they haven't been remediated yet, school is going to be hard. And so finding that outlet, that gift, many people say, that they can shine in, I think that's important. And so, a lot of the work that I do working with moms is really helping them unpack their mindset around, like you said earlier, this is a different journey. And it's not the journey I thought I signed up for, right? Like, it's different than what I thought I was going to have the moment I had my child. It looks different. And you get to a point where you realize it's really okay though. But at the beginning, it feels like it's not. It feels overwhelming. So I wanted a place where she could come and listen to the podcast, listen to experts talk about different pieces of dyslexia, hear from real moms who are in the journey and how they're walking through that journey as well. And then providing them some resources, that are available to them at the beginning of their journey, just to kind of help get them on the road to success, and to pick out those pieces of, what does it mean to thrive? What do I need to be looking at? And a lot of times I think too, with parents at the beginning, you may do like I did. I just did one day of tutoring. One day for most dyslexics is not enough remediation, and you're going to start seeing other signs. And then what does that mean? And so really it's just giving them a community, a safe place to go. I have a private Facebook group that's free that goes with the podcast community, just so moms have a place to go where they can ask questions. I have advocates and attorneys and professionals in there as well that will, pop in from time to time and give feedback when people ask a question. So I just, one of the things I struggled with as a mom was, there's so much on social media, and you don't know what is, is this valid? Is this credible? Is it not? And so I was able to go through that research and read the books and kind of use my gifts as far as analyzing and researching to kind of pull it all together, but then give them a positive place to land, because so many of the Facebook groups are so negative. And I get sometimes you do have to sue a school district. I get that. But I think at the end of the day, if we look at it from a partnership perspective, we look at it about building relationships with our child and building relationships with our team, who could be our reading specialist or the second grade teacher or the principal. I really believe if we work together as a partner, even if that partner doesn't understand everything about dyslexia, they want to do what's best for your child. And your child's going to do better with that kind of environment than a more adversarial type environment if you can avoid that. I just think that's really important. So I wanted to give moms a positive place to come where they could get the information, and then they could also find a community. And I was talking to a mom earlier this week, coaching a mom, and she said, I live in a small town and I feel completely alone. But when I listen to the podcast, I hear other people and I know that I'm not alone. And, that's, that makes it all worth it. Just being able to know that someone is getting a benefit from the work that we're doing. And, my daughter's a huge inspiration to that. She gets really excited about the blog and the podcast, and she gives me ideas. And I've actually interviewed her for the podcast, her idea. She wanted to be interviewed, which I think will be neat. I'd like every year to maybe interview her, see different stages that she's at and that she could share. I think that would be really neat to do in the future. So yeah, it's gone a lot of different directions, but I really just hope to be a place of positive inspiration, just fun, place that they can go and just kind of, have a place to go where they feel safe and secure and can ask the questions that they need to ask.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, so I will make sure to have your website down in the show notes so they can find the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast.
Thank you.
And the Dyslexia Parenting Academy.
Great. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much, Nicole, again, for coming on and talking with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun to talk and get to know you and to be on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. And I know you and I'm going to be on your podcast soon. So
I'm excited.
I get to hang out with your crowd as well, which I'm really happy about.
I will love that because I get lots of questions that are all in your wheelhouse. So it would be great to have someone else to come on and talk about those pieces. That would be great. Perfect.
Okay, Nicole, I will be talking to you soon.
All right. Sounds great.
Okay,
thanks.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like this episode, please share it with someone. It may just be what they need to watch today. If you're a parent, I'd love if you came on over and joined our Facebook group, Autism ADHD Group for Parents. If you're a therapist or educator, come on over to our group, Autism ADHD Group for Therapists and Educators. You're going to find those links right down there in the notes. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.